important. One thing that people have been asking us about, and one thing we've been reading about, has been the impact of the coronavirus pandemic on renewable energy. Hello, everybody, and happy 4th of July weekend. I'm Eric Planey.
Hi, I'm Lucas Venko. Welcome.
Welcome, everybody, and we are the Pirates of Cleantech, and happy to have you here.
Arg.
Yeah, I'm not doing the arg. You sound better with the arg than I do.
I still do it.
You still do it. I'll do it at the end when no one's watching us.
All right.
Anyways, we want to say this is a special episode for us. Thank you, everybody, for the great feedback and constructive criticism we've been getting. The show is going to be an evolution. We're looking forward to the next few weeks when we're going to roll out some strategy changes and some differences in the way we present our material and hopefully have some guest hosts. But for now, we thought it's very important. One thing that people have been asking us about, and one thing we've been reading about, has been the impact of the coronavirus pandemic on renewable energy. And there's so many different ways that we can address this that we thought we would start with some big picture presentations of what we've seen thus far. And then we're going to take it into a subset of a couple articles. Coronavirus obviously is still a situation that is not under control here in the United States. And we commend a lot of countries in Europe and Asia who have done a great job of putting it under control. It's impacted all of us. We all know somebody that probably had it. And unfortunately, we do know people that have lost their lives and lost the battle to coronavirus. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Lucas for kind of a special moment.
Yeah, we just wanted to take a moment and remember John Shipman. For those of you that didn't know him, he was integral to the EV deployment and rollout here in New York City. He worked at Con Edison. He was a manager of the Commercial and Industrial Energy Efficiency Group and the EV Group. And sadly, we lost him a few weeks ago. And so we'd like to play a short memorial that was provided to us by H.G. Chisel over at Advanced Energy Group. You can Google them if you want to find out about their mission. They have roundtables in major cities around the U.S. So without further ado, here's a short memorial.
EVs will happen. EVs are happening. The question becomes, how do you move it as an industry the fastest? How do we leverage that infrastructure across the customer segments such that each person doesn't have to dig so deep into their pocket to get charging? Can we do that by developing fast charging hubs across the city where a transit bus or a package delivery vehicle or the general public in a passenger car can pull in and charge effectively? Then you start to get utilization numbers that make the business case for building fast charge stations, as well as lowering the overall cost for folks. And that's my pitch.
Okay, thank you for that. And thank you, John, for everything you did. I know you were a big part of my life and my impacts on the EV rollout and our understanding of EVs here in New York City. So I'll always remember you, John. Thanks.
Yeah, very nice, Lucas. I'm sorry to say I never knew John. Maybe at some point I saw him speak, but everyone who has talked about him has just talked about him with the nicest and kindest things to say. And, you know, it's sad when we lose anybody to coronavirus, but especially somebody who had a vision for the future and who was, you know, one of the implementers of that vision. So it's a sad loss for everybody, and thank you for those moments. So with that, we're going to go into talk a little bit more about coronavirus and its impact on sustainability and renewable energy. And there's definitely pros and cons to it. I think what we're going to say in the end run is that it could actually be a positive because everybody is taking a collective pause, both individually and on a policy standpoint, and looking at how we're going to stimulate our economies globally in part of the recovery. And many countries are looking at sustainability and renewable energy as part of that stimulus. The organization, the article that we really wanted to kind of leap with and start with is from our friends at the International Energy Agency, or IEA. Anybody who is looking for any research on on coronavirus should go to the IEA's website, iea.org. They have a whole subset, a whole section that's really goes back to March, April, when the coronavirus pandemic was breaking out. So we're going to take you to that topical section right now. We're not going to cover everything, but we want to give you, since they had a latest update, I think, refresh as of last week. So you can see if you go to iea.org /topics /COVID-19, this is where you will find information. So Lucas, if you just want to do a little bit of scrolling, I think the net takeaway, let's start from a kind of energy generation standpoint. I think just even for the last couple of weeks of the March quarter end, the United States was already showing a 2.5% decline in power generation overall. Countries that are in full lockdown have seen up to an average of 25% decline in energy demand per week. And partial lockdown countries have seen an average decline of 18%. Obviously, so many people have been talking about how people have bluer skies and cleaner waters during this crisis. I think it's fair to say that in some countries, a lot of fossil fuel generation has been switched off. And in European countries, I believe in particular, you've seen kind of the transferring where the clean energy solutions that are currently on the grid have been in implementation. In the US, it's been a little bit different. Obviously, the big monster in power generation over the last couple years in the United States has been gas. And gas generation has pretty much remained constant. But the good news is some coal has dropped off during the coronavirus crisis in the United States. If you want to go a little bit further down, the sustainable energy, this is really interesting. Also, the one thing we've seen, and you can tell this chart is fascinating, we've seen a decrease in the demand for mobility, and that's just been fewer cars on the road from the crisis. Obviously, I like this chart because you see how the China drop-off happened so quickly. Now, bear in mind, there was also a little bit of an economic recession taking place in China. So this chart is looking at it not in terms of calendar event, but actually in weeks from the beginning of the pandemic. And as you can see, everybody has significant drop-off. China had a very significant drop-off. It's obviously more of a controlled economy. So therefore, when they implemented measures to lock down the economy in order to prevent the spread of the virus, the drop-off rate was much faster. The lockdowns were in the United States were either more on a state by state basis, or just given the fact that, part of the economy was really shut down quickly, including services and manufacturing, it also tailed off here in the United States. But again, now, of course, from an emission standpoint, emissions dropped off as a result of that, so you did have cleaner air. The recovery on sustainability is kind of varied in forecast right now. A lot of people are talking about the fact that this may actually delay the rollout or further use of social vehicle transport like Lyfts and Ubers, because people are going to feel the comfort and safety of being in their own vehicle as part of the recovery takes place. But at the same time, this could potentially dovetail with policy going forward in both the United States and globally to promote electric vehicle technology, which of course is different than autonomous vehicle, but I think you're going to see the recovery to have stimulus spending on infrastructure related to EV charging. Let's see if you want to keep going a little bit further down. We're not going to talk about too much in terms of, there was a category up above, we don't have to go to it, but obviously oil demand has dropped off as a result of both the mobility side and the industrial side. Since we focus on renewable energy, it's something you can take a look at, but nothing we're going to really discuss. And this is kind of the segue that is really interesting that will go into some of Lucas's articles. But global electricity demand decreased by 2.5% in the first quarter of 2020. Apologies, I think I said the US up front, but that was actually a global number. Now remember, most of the world, those lockdown measures were only in place in the select countries. So obviously for what is the second calendar quarter, April 1st to June 30th, we're going to see significant drop-offs, and that's where we're talking 20% plus drop-offs in electricity. I like this chart again because it's showing it on the number of days since the lockdown began, because everyone varied slightly, and you're just going to see how much electricity dropped off. Let's see, Lucas is focusing on a couple of the lines. China line is a little interesting. I think we'd have to read into the data because that really kind of shows a flat number, whereas in some of the other countries in Western Europe and potentially India, you're seeing a lot more like varied usage based upon different various stages of the lockdown. Now, as the lockdowns are easing a little bit, obviously personal consumption has been increasing. It's been increasing during lockdown, but it wasn't enough to offset all the power that came off the grid because there was just less demand for it on a commercial and industrial basis. So I think this is really good. I refer to anyone to go to the IEA. Also the EIA, which we're going to speak about, also has great statistics as well. But there's a lot of information out there to get real-time, big picture data on what has happened from coronavirus. With that, we'll take a look at some subset articles with Lucas, and then maybe we'll wrap it up here at the end.
Yeah, very interesting to see that just the global impact at IEA, which is very interesting to look at as opposed to some of the local ones, which I'll bring up now. So there's this big question about COVID-19 has changed purchasing patterns of electricity. So are the utilities going to get into trouble? And so Utility Dive has a great article on this. And their conclusion was it's not all bad for utilities. And so they actually talked to a small municipal utility. Here I wanted to highlight in Missouri. They saw revenues decline by about $1 million. That might not seem like much, but they had only 36 million operating revenues last year. So that's about 3% drop in revenues. But it's interesting because it will be more than offset by a 1.8 million decrease in expenses. So this actually could end up being a net positive for them as far as on the books. You know, that's a lot of money because they typically have about 2.5 million in operating income every year. So, you know, a 0.8 million increase might be a significant amount. So the utilities appear to be doing okay. They're seeing a lot of shift, so to speak, from mainly commercial loads like retail and office buildings into residential. So I think net, you know, kind of net energy consumption is down a little, but yeah, they seem to be doing okay on the cost side. So just a 3% decrease in revenues so far. So I thought this was really interesting. I don't know, Eric, if you had anything to add.
No, the only thing I thought is I think you're going to cover this in a forthcoming article, but I'm just curious about looking at this summer and about peakers being online. If they're, you know, the use of peakers is going to drop off substantially because the demand just won't be there. But I think you may be covering that, or that may be a little bit more in the EIA article that you're going to take a look at.
Yeah, I think a lot of people are freaking out about that because the typical kind of energy consumption patterns are not there anymore. They're totally different. They look more residential, they look more flat. So I know forecasters are going crazy trying to figure out what's going to happen. I do have one article on that, which we'll talk about. So if we can go into details. So EIA, this is EIA's Today in Energy, which I love visiting all the time. They have some great graphs. Less commercial industrial electricity use. This is from April. So you can definitely see that residential looks kind of normal. Commercial and industrial has dropped off quite a bit, 10% and 9%. This is US monthly electricity sales. So this is going to have a big impact on commercial industrial, not so much on residential. And you can see the peakiness here in residential in the summer. So residential, commercial, even industrial, little driving that peak. So there's a big question about peak in the summer. And peak is important because that's how the utility decides how much capital to invest in the system. You know, they have to meet peak demand no matter what. So they have to have equipment in the system. So this is another great graph. We'll see this again in a second. Electricity sales versus temperature. So you can see it usually has this kind of U shape where if it's really hot, people run air conditioners. If it's really cold, people run their electric heaters. And you see this U shape. So April actually was pretty normal for residential. But look at for commercial industrial, just right off the map. That's not fitting anyone's forecast. That is a huge outlier. So there's a lot of concern about what's going to happen this summer and how the system is going to handle this. You know, say for instance, if the system's built for a peak that comes from commercial users and the commercial users aren't there and all that load moves to residential, you know, they might have enough assets in the residential side to handle the load. So there is a concern about that. Here's another great one from May. This is a little old, but just if you want to see what's really happening, this is New York City, which is near and dear to my heart. Weekly electricity demand. This is February, March, April. And you can see the temperature comparable demand from last year to this year is a huge decrease. A lot of it in the middle of the day here, this 9 to 5 region, when commercial, when retail, when office buildings would be using a lot of electricity, they're just not showing up. And you can see that here also. So yeah, it's been a hard time for forecasters. Here's that U-shaped curve again. And you can see we have huge outlying here compared to historical.
Yeah, again, I thought this was a great start. Are you, you still have a little bit more to go?
No, that's I have just one article about what we can do about it.
Yeah, so my quick question on this, or quick issue, is, uh, again, I think this is really informative. New York City and New York State is now becoming this, unfortunately, this inverted outlier. We are the outlier because we were early on in the coronavirus pandemic. That's why we have all this data coming from March, April that showed the shutdown. Now we're in a different situation where New York City and New York State is reopening, while a lot of the United States is kind of regressing and unfortunately going back into a lockdown scenario. I think what will be interesting is in New York State, you're going to see data about recovery. I think you're going to see manufacturing make a comeback. You're going to see some light industrial make a comeback. And even more interesting, offices are starting to open up, particularly in New York City, but they're not going to open up with full staff and crew, but nonetheless, you still have to power those commercial buildings. So I do think you're going to see a recovery, but you're probably not going to see a recovery that's going to cause demand for the peakers.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting. As long as everybody doesn't rush in on the hottest day of the year to the office and turn everything on, I think we'll be okay. But still, predicting what the number's going to be, I'm glad I don't have that job right now.
I don't think anyone's going to be rushing into their office on the hottest day this year. I think people will be working from home with the splash of the kiddie pool that they bought probably at 300% premium on Amazon. They don't have access to any other swimming pool for their family.
Probably.
Maybe the sound of the compressor is inflating those pools. That's it.
I'm gonna be in one of those. Forget the kids.
I'm not allowed in most of them. I think I exceed the limits for the.
Well, I did too. Okay, so I wanted to bring up this article because it's a glint of hope and good news. There's an AI model that's been developed by Microsoft and the University of Washington researchers that's using smartphone location data to help predict power grid usage. So this is a good outcome. So they're responding to the changes in load patterns and peak demands. So this is great. So you need new modeling, you need new strategies, and so researchers are coming up with better ways to model electricity demand and inform the utilities where the load's going to be and what they can do about it.
So are they changing their existing model in terms of the actual physical model that they're using? Are they updating it, or has the change been so significant that they really have to kind of start with scratch and create new models?
I mean, they really have to, well, they're not starting totally from scratch, but they're starting to add locational aspects to the demand, like where's the demand going to be and how's it going to be shaped differently. And so this shows kind of their error rate is really, really low compared to the original, say, NISO prediction. This looks like an error rate of 12.9. Now it's 5.2 with their model. So they've added kind of new data. And this is also going to be, I'm sad to say it, big data, right? Because you're looking at individual smartphone locations, and then you're aggregating that to get a better load forecast. So very interesting.
It is truly interesting, and it's great that people are kind of staying on top of this, because if you think about it, there is going to be some remnant of a new normal that takes place after coronavirus. Everybody talks about how people will be working from home a little bit, probably greater in mass. So demand at commercial office space for electricity may drop off. Add to it, everybody is still kind of working on distributed energy models, community solar models, et cetera, et cetera. So there's a lot going on both the supply side, the demand side. There's still a lot of gas-fired generation that's coming online in the United States over the next couple of years, a lot of merchant power from that. So we definitely need better forecasting models and better accuracy, because from a finance side of things, in order to finance certain projects, the better the quality of the data about where the supply and demand is taking place, the better it is to make rational decisions about use of capital going forward. So I think this is great. I think it's also very good for us too, just in the wake of the existing coronavirus pandemic and knowing what is happening with society as a result.
Yeah, and this impacts your bill, and this impacts investment decisions, right? And possibly about clean energy at the utility.
Exactly.
Cool.
So I'd say one thing that Lucas and I talked about really quickly was looking at articles that address policy going forward. Right now, the more solidified articles that are out there are dealing with European and EU stimulus package investments that revolve around clean energy. So a part of the coronavirus economic response seems to be embedded in countries like, or the EU, or areas like the EU, that they're going to have clean energy and clean energy spending as part of it. In the United States, that is less so. We just haven't gotten to that point yet. We're still dealing with the pandemic. But we hope that the information we provided for you today will help people in making better informed decisions and making policy decisions that are going to be geared towards renewable energy coming online as a part of the economic stimulus response and as part of the power grid response for clean tech going forward.
Yep. Thank you guys for coming. If you like our show, please click the like button. And if you want to be informed when our next show goes live, you can click the subscribe button. As always, we'd like to hear your comments and your feedback, so feel free to give that.
Yep. And just really quick, the views and opinions expressed by Lucas and myself are those of ourselves and no other organization we are affiliated with. And we did have some articles that were not related to COVID that we really like. So pay attention to our Twitter feed, which is @CleanPirates, and we're going to post some of those articles with maybe a quick comment or two. So again, thank you very much. We hope everybody during this 4th of July holiday does have the time to relax and unwind and appreciate our country and the fundamentals of our country's democracy. At the same time, though, please, everybody practice safe social distancing measures. We need to fight this and we need to return to the new normal, and that's not going to take place until we tackle this pandemic.
Yep. Remember to wear a mask when you're outside and enjoy the 4th of July holiday.
Yep. And Lucas and I will wear a mask and eye patch, so you'll barely even see us, which is probably a good thing.
Yeah, here we go.
Oh, finally, he's putting his eye patch on.
There we go. No, I'm going to put my mask on here.
Oh.
So there we go. Get your mask on. Yep. Make sure you wear that.
I'm going to go with 18th, 19th century cowboy.
There we go. Wear your
looks
mask.
Looks like I'm going to be holding up a train.
We can beat this virus. All you need is a mask and some social distancing, and we'll beat it.
Exactly. So if you see us two hoodlums like this walking down the street, please say hello, but from 6 feet away. Everybody have a great weekend.
Have a great weekend. Arg.
Arg.